Call the meeting to order. Call the roll.
Trustee Fenner.
Here.
Trustee Dodge. Trustee Calandrello. Here. Trustee Ely.
Here.
Trustee Higgins.
Here.
Trustee Maloney.
Here.
Mayor Peacock.
Here. We should do the pledge.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight we're going to have a budget hearing on the fiscal year 2020 capital improvement plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dubleby.
Mr. Mayor, tonight staff will present funds available for capital, technology, and vehicles, and staff's recommendation for the 2020 budget. Per the Board of Trustees direction, staff has reevaluated all capital programs, both items, and used the following criteria to prioritize the projects. FIP indicates a failure in progress. It basically says they doubt it'll last 12 months. It's something that has to be taken care of immediately. FIM indicates failure imminent. They feel certainly within the next 12 to 24 months the item could fail. In both of those cases, if those items aren't approved and it fails, additional funds will probably be necessary to expedite repairs and replacement of those items. PLR is life cycle replacement. What we used is the analogy of buying a car. Some cars will last 3 years, some cars will last for 20. All the directors were asked to look at the projects they bring forward in terms of life cycle and kind of predict where they're at in there. Is it a car that's only going to last 3 years or 20? Apply that to your recommendation, and then new projects. The road programs have already been tentatively approved by the board for about $4 million in additional debt, and that's part of the road program that's been discussed previously. If the Board of Trustees approves all the items in the capital budget, it would increase debt by an additional $7.848 million. That's if all projects are approved. The amount of debt would be determined by the items formally approved by the Board of Trustees as part of the 2020 budget. The shaded areas of the sheet you have are items that were, at the last Board of Trustees meeting, were above the line and can be approved without additional borrowing. The unshaded items are items at the last meeting, budget meeting, were below the line and would need additional borrowing. In terms of current village debt, in 2019, $6.7 million in government obligation bonds will be reduced by principal payments. An additional of a little over $5 million in 2020. In 2021 and 2022, $19 million of debt will come off in each year. Those are associated with the TIF. So by the end of 2022, $49 million in debt will go away. We're not recommending that you replace it with $49 million worth of debt, but it certainly gives you the latitude to continue being fiscally responsible and take on debt as it makes sense to provide services to the community. With that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Anne Marie. To Director, ma'am.
Sorry about that. Okay, so this is the handout that was handed out at the last CIP meeting, kind of rearranged like Tom said. Also, we have some additional funding sources. So I wasn't going to go through the whole thing, but just kind of touch on some things high level. So the first page here that you see up on the screen is what's going to fund our FY 2020 capital projects, as well as our technology and vehicle and equipment purchases. Those are all attached in these documents here on the table, and all of this is also on your iPad. If you want to look at it on hard copy, I can get you a copy. So you can kind of see there that most of the funding for next year's CIP plan is our usual funding. We always use home rule sales tax. We transfer revenue from the general fund, road and bridge, vehicle stickers. The motor fuel tax, we do have some excess fund balance in our motor fuel tax fund, so we're going to request that the board authorize the use of that. We did that a couple years ago. I think 3 years ago we utilized it to fund capital. We've also got some CIP revenues, which is some STP funding on a specific project, as well as just miscellaneous revenues of that fund. Home rule sales tax, our total home rule sales tax collections are about $10 million. We've got about $6.6 million of it available to fund capital. The remainder is either reserved for future debt service payments and or making current year debt service payments. Line of credit proceeds and additional debt. We've got a line of credit at BMO Harris Bank that we would utilize for the $4 million, and then we'd have to go back out to the market to get the additional $4.8 million in funding. And then the last two are water and sewer fund revenues, and then also a $3 million line of credit or bond that we would go out and issue to fund some projects within the water and sewer fund. So behind this list is just all of the individual projects listed in the order that Tom had previously mentioned. Failures imminent, failures in process, it's a planned replacement, and then we've got some new projects listed there. So everything on the listing that's both up there, here on the table, as well on your iPads, falls within the funding that we have listed here. So I don't know if the board has individual questions they'd like to ask about individual items or about the revenue or how we want to move forward.
I would say, let's just flip page by page.
Okay.
Mayor Peak, I have questions.
Trustee Dodge?
Go ahead, James, go. Just, can you go back to the previous page? Just the summary. So round numbers, $8.8 million of new debt, because the debt for water and sewer basically spent on water and sewer, and those are backed up by revenue streams, correct?
Yes.
So 8.8 million worth of general obligation debt, essentially.
Well, we wouldn't, my recommendation would be that we don't actually go out and issue general obligation debt. We won't go out and issue bonds. The $4 million that's listed there is already existing at BMO Harris.
I got it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that $8.8 million that we have access to in a line of credit is essentially and effectively backed up by the faith and credit of the Village of Orland Park.
Yes, but we would not, you are
It's not
absolutely
technically a
right.
general obligation
We're not
bond
going
per
to levy
se,
for it.
but,
Right. Yep.
and,
So
okay.
we'd be using home rule sales tax to make those payments.
and then the 3.3, that's essentially all water system upgrades, and it's all backed by water system monies, correct? The $3 million, the additional debt?
Yes, so there's, within the water fund, we do a rate study, and we have certain reserves that we set aside in order to meet those reserve policies in 2020, based upon our existing rate structure that we have in place. We would need to borrow some of that funding. We're going to do a rate study again. 2020 is the last year of rates that are actually published in our ordinances, so we'll do a rate study at some point early 2020 to develop rates going forward.
Okay. $12 million worth of debt.
That's what's listed there, yes.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton?
could you, off the top of your head, ballpark, that's the reason I called you earlier, if we only did the projects that are labeled FIP and not all these new ones that were put in here or the FIM ones, what would the capital budget be off the top of your head?
So with just doing the failure in process or failure imminent, which I think Tom said was probably within the next 12 months, if we only did those, we'd knock about $22 million of this off. So there's $22 million in either new or planned replacements on these lists. And those are summarized. I don't think I included that summary on here. I did not. But it would knock off about $22 million.
And Director Mampy, the water and sewer fund, the reason for the $3 million for the operating is because our revenues are soft this year due to the extended rainfall.
Yeah, we've seen a significant decline in our consumption over the last 3 years, and 19 has taken a pretty big hit. So although our rates have gone up every year over the last 5 years, because our consumption has gone down so much, our actual revenue has gone down. So that's one, I mean, we were going to go out and do a rate study anyways because we're at the end of the 5 years, but we definitely need to go out and analyze our water fund in detail to develop rates going forward.
Any other questions on this? Go ahead.
So I don't know how you want to if you want to walk through each one of these. This is the general fund, so these are mostly just building maintenance type improvements that either are in any of those 4 categories that we just talked about. There's some larger ones in there, such as the HVAC replacements at the Sportsplex. Sorry for the question marks there. It's actually RTU number 4. And then there's a bunch of kind of smaller ones also that are in that total. So building maintenance staff is here if you guys have any individual questions about any of these projects.
Okay.
Keep going? Okay. Then we get into our Rec and Parks Fund. So this is obviously all different improvements related to our recreation facilities and parks. Probably the largest one on there is the continued improvements of the John Humphrey Complex. And I believe there's another $500,000 budgeted for that in 2021. And then also we've got the $1.5 million on there for park access, site and safety and security improvements. That would be spent village-wide across all village parks based upon the parks assessment that Gary and his staff just completed.
And just for everybody's benefit, the shaded areas are what we've already discussed and we agreed to keep in
Yes.
there. And the non-shaded are the new projects that have been added.
Yeah, well, so the shaded, I should have said that at the beginning, the shaded items are those that were presented to the board at the last CIP meeting that were kind of above the line that we had existing funding for. So all these projects were on the list, but the non-shaded ones were below the line that we did not have funding for. Any questions on this?
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
I guess I just have the same question. It's almost like we don't have the money, but yet in here they're listing all these new projects. So in other words, let's just put in everything and then just go borrow the money for it. Whether you're doing a line of credit or you're doing a bond, you're still borrowing the money. You still have to pay it back. You still have interest. So I guess when you don't have the money, why would you just add new things when you really should just be focusing on what needs to be done?
I mean, it's a board policy, board choice on what we end up including in here. These are the recommendations that we received from the various directors and were discussed and prioritized amongst all of us. So, I mean, we can make any changes that the board so desires.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calendrello.
Gary, this might be a question for you. I don't know if we need to talk about what projects are going to get done this year, or if this is the appropriate time, or we're going to go to committee. I mean, it's 1.5 for this year. For some reason, I feel like one draft, this was 1.8, and then 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. Is that correct? There was a draft.
Yeah, we actually made some changes today based upon some feedback that we had received. So this is the updated version.
Okay, so
You're not
okay, 'cause
dreaming. It was 1.8 before.
It was 1.8, and then it was double almost every year after that. It was, well, 15, it was 1.5, and now it's only 800 or 700. Okay.
Yep. And Gary can get into kind of why that was modified.
Yeah, we tweaked those numbers a bit moving forward so that we could incorporate Schuylkill Park's renovation in a more timely fashion, as that neighborhood's dealt with a ton of construction over the last several years. This was to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Excuse me. Shorten it. Shorten the
Well,
disruption
Schuylkill
of
Park
their
was
lives.
over 4 years, right? And
At
now
this
it's going to
point,
be
too.
done at one?
Correct.
In one? Right. Because that subdivision's had construction for what, 5, well, at that point, we'll have had construction for 5 years?
Correct.
Right. And then your parks, I know you didn't list the individual parks, so maybe you can explain how the plan was to do that off of the,
So what we did was we reviewed the, I have an updated draft I can send to you if you'd like, from the assessment report from Studio GC.
Gary, do you want us to pull that up on the screen?
Sure, you
Would that
can.
be helpful?
Yeah.
I don't know how big.
We have a ranking system based on several categories: security, accessibility, and the general condition of each site. We started at the top of that list, and staff and I went through each park individually, identified the right-of-way issues that had to be dealt with, such as compliance with ADA, repairing things that are in failure or could cause a hazard. We went through each park and tallied up the repairs that we see that are needed at this point in time. It's the bottom one, Ann, if you go back one.
there was the page that you shared with me that had the 2 pages that totaled the 3.9 million or whatever.
Oh, that would be the,
Yeah, it's coming, sorry. Go down a little bit.
so this is a copy of the draft of the report. This is the scoring sheet that I did provide you. The numbers have changed slightly since the last draft.
There we go, so there's the 3.9. So trustee Calandrello, how that was spread over is the 3.9 that's listed here in this report. It was spread over the 5 years. So we have some of it in the first year, kind of front-loaded in the first year, and then the remainder was spread out across the out years.
Can you go down so I can see the first,
Go
the other way?
Other way.
So we can see the first 30 or whatever.
So a little bit more. This mouse is very temperamental. So the park name is listed there, and then it scored it and gave an average score.
Correct, and I also have listed on the shared drive, I think it should be on your tablets as well,
It is.
a breakdown of our assessment sheets listing what that dollar amount encompasses and the repairs that we're looking for at each site. I can pull up a couple examples if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you throw up a couple of examples?
Which
just-
park?
Pull up Village Square.
Okay, that would, yep.
So these were based on the recommendations from the consultant, these were some of the improvements that we saw that would be needed at Village Square. We wanted to replace the 2 to 5 area of the play set, which is one side, it's isolated, so this allows us to do part of the play structure without all of it. In doing so, we can replace that tripping hazard of the elevated plastic curbing and install concrete border around it. The pavilion there is a 2-pole system that's somewhat hazardous, as you can shake the entire structure. So this would include a larger structure moved over to the side, allowing us to put an ADA access path to our athletic fields, which are rented heavily at that location. That would also include paving around the dugouts and the bleacher area, and trying to read it. Oh, that's
R&R
also repair
color
the
cert.
basketball court.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
Gary, is all of this that you have in this for the 1.5 million, is it actually practical that we're going to get it done in 1 year?
A good majority of it will be contracted work. So the paving, we will go out to bid, hopefully piggyback off of the Public Works account to get a better price on the paving, and that will be done by a vendor. And yes, it should be able to be accomplished without any issue. Same thing with the concrete. We should be able to piggyback off a bid that they have going. They have the curbing installed, concrete ramps. Fencing is rather done quickly. And pavilions, whatever is approved, we will bid out in bulk so that we get a better price and we have a vendor doing it, so we can get it done in a timely fashion. Sorry, not using the mic.
Okay.
Anything else on this? We'll switch back to that.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Calandrello.
how many parks currently are, would you say, failure in progress, failure immediate, or lifetime replacement?
So
Can you show that
I
page?
wouldn't say it's the, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Show
go
the
go to
yeah,
that color.
page.
Yep,
Thank you. Color-coded one.
yeah.
Thank you.
So this is color-coded, and the areas that are below 2.5 are considered in need of upgrades or renovation. Not all of these are playground actual amenities. Some of them are areas that we're not in compliance with. We have a great number of parks that have been installed prior to the ADA Acts of 1990s
Green space.
and the 2010 iteration. So we get hit for points on that for not being compliant, even though we are grandfathered.
Right, but the general would be, all the orange in general would be,
Correct, but when you go through and actually read a lot of these reports, yes, they will mention some specific areas within our equipment, but the first one I just actually pulled up, park is in exceptional condition for its, given its age. We see that a lot through their comments that our staff has maintained, you know, our assets quite well. They are aging, and we're trying to use this methodology to kind of touch all aspects, all corners of town.
So would it be fair to say that all the stuff that's in orange, like Trustee Calandrello said, that's what this 3.9 million, it's basically to get all of those things up to
The vast majority of it, yes, sir.
Okay.
but we're only funding the 3.9, and how many years is it going to, well, I have a calculator, I'll do the math right now, but how
Well,
many
that
years?
was in 5 years. That also enables me to get another complex renovated and back online 4 years earlier, which helps our soccer groups, our baseball groups, and it also ties into having some efficiencies with the stormwater project that Public Works was going to have done at that site.
And I 100% support that we get Schuster done, because that neighborhood's is under construction as it is. Now, we have a master plan for Schuster. Is that the plan we're going to go with?
That would be what we were looking, well, we have a rendering or a rough design that was done for Schuster. In 2020, we're asking for the funding to have the engineering and the construction docs done for Schuster, so that all the work can be performed in 2021 in conjunction with the Public Works Stormwater Project.
But we're only going to be passing a budget for 2021, so we need,
No, correct. The engineering, design, and construction documents are being requested for 2020.
okay.
And my understanding is the Public Works project's going to be wrapping up in 2021, and we want to do that in conjunction. Certain parts of the Schuster Park work, it makes sense to do in conjunction with that, and then the rest of the Schuster Park work, as we discussed, we're doing so that we can be done with Schuster Park, so that the folks that have been looking at Schuster Park and looking at all this construction for 5 years or 6 years, it can be done and not spread over another 4 to 5 years.
That's correct.
Okay.
So again, just like, I'm sorry, Ms. Mayor, is it okay if we have this, Ms. Mayor?
Trustee Calandrello?
Sure. So in 5 years, we'll get to all the parks that need work based on the funding that's projected here.
Correct, and we will conduct another assessment at that time. As we move forward and make these repairs, we will adjust our master sheet, but this will be reassessed in 5 years as we move forward to identify any new discrepancies or any new.
Right, and we have
things that need to be maintained.
65 parks. So, and we're just doing piecemeal these corrections to these parks on the budget, right? We're not doing a whole park like we used to do. We're doing, like the Village Square example.
That's correct.
Okay.
But it's fair to say some of the parks are getting almost completely redone.
Yes, there's quite a
because-
bit being done at some of the
right.
sites.
And there's, in total, as I recall that sheet, what, 54 of the parks are being
54 playgrounds, yes, sir.
playgrounds? Okay.
I just like to see a little more consistent funding than that's presented today. That's just my personal opinion.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge?
Just so it's clear to everybody, what was the explain what was in the document about the working definition of security?
There were several items that were referenced in security. For example, one item mentioned was the security of park patrons at Bill Young Park. That location is right off of 153rd Street. And while we do have a fence in place per our audit, 100 feet of a roadway, their suggestion was to put ballards or a guardrail in essence to prevent the chance of a car going right off of that into the playground area. Other ones had recommendations for lighting. Other areas said to seek information from your police department to see if they felt some of those areas needed to be addressed.
Mayor Pico, my point for bringing that up is just as if we get to a place where we allocate the kind of funding to touch as many parks as possible over the years, obviously, security is an important issue, and I think that it's on you guys to get that review from the police department. And I'll talk to the park that I know best, which is Mission Hills, where I live.
Okay.
Park's generally in pretty good shape, as it shows by the ratings. So depending on your definition of security and what you can or can't see from the road, given the size of the growth of the hedges over 20 years. So I just would want to put it out there that, I don't want to say it's a policy, but just broadly, a key consideration to the extent that these are relatively straightforward and easy to address on security. That's a big one.
Very good, sir.
Thank you.
And I know that one of the parks that I looked at, that you showed me a sample of, had the basketball court was right next to the parking, and so basically a car could go straight down the parking aisle and go into the basketball court. So the recommendation was to put a landscape hedge and some bollards in there to provide separation so that no one drives straight into the basketball court. So it's
Same,
things like
along the
that.
same lines, yep.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay.
Anything else on this? Okay. So the last of our operating capital, hold on.
And if we could, well, no, never mind, just go ahead and keep going.
What did you? Okay. You want to flip next page? So up at the top is Civic Center. There's 3 planned improvements there. I don't, if anybody has any questions, if Bill here could give you some response on those. And then we kind of jump into what we call our infrastructure capital, so the Park Development Fund that is funded by impact fees and/or home rule sales tax. So those are all new, but some of them are, and obviously Gary could speak more to these.
Where did you go?
Park Development Fund.
Yeah, and one comment I have on this is that some of the things that you see in here, like bike paths and things like that, we have met with Cook County, and they're on Cook County roads, and Cook County has expressed that they plan to fund these. So, and you don't see them in this year, but you see them in the out years in the 5-year plan. So keep in mind that some of what you see in the 5-year plan, there should be alternative funding sources to the village money, but that's not necessarily reflected in the plan what the funding sources are at this time.
Main Street Triangle Fund is up there, so we've got some just regular consulting that we do, some LED lighting upgrades, and then also some infrastructure relocation based upon I think the RDA that we're working on with a potential developer. So that may change over time, but right now that's the cost of relocating some of the infrastructure that was previously put in place based upon an old design. Open lands, we've got about $100,000 in there for continued improvements at the Stellwagen Farm. And I just keep going on unless anyone has questions. So now we get into our capital development fund, which is mostly road-related infrastructure. There's a number of projects on here. We're continuing engineering on 143rd Street, both Wolf Road to Southwest Highway, as well as Will Cook to Wolf, John Humphrey Drive. There's some LED lighting conversions. You can kind of read through them. The 2 large ones at the bottom is our roadway maintenance program, which is our annual program, and then we've got the additional amount in there for 2020 for the road reconstruction program. So these are 2 of the items that would be funded through some sort of borrowing.
And could we show what would be done?
Yes. Can you pull that Word document up? It's a Word doc, so it's a little.
And also, I think it's important to note that, well, we say that the borrowing is for these roads, the borrowing is for the projects in general, because previously we had approved these and the borrowing would have been 4 million, not 11, so.
Yeah, we would just have to define it when we went out to the
Understood.
market, so.
Understood. We have to define it for the bond market, but at the end of the day, we're looking at borrowing the, total amount of money for all of the projects.
So this is, and Public Works can speak more to it, this is the list of subdivisions and/or roads that would be done as part of these programs in 2020. Any questions?
Any questions?
Just a comment, Mayor Pico.
Trustee Dodge?
We need to invest in our roads. Roads cost money. You either borrow it, or you raise taxes, or you cut expenditures elsewhere. Pretty simple formula.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Calandrello?
can I assume that we're using the ARA study to pick out what we need to do and what's the reason behind these neighborhoods? I'm all for road funding. I just wonder how we pick and choose who gets it and how, and what next.
I think you're just going down the list, right?
For the most part, we are. There are certain things that are like other capital programs, water main replacement. That's where the fairway comes into play. It may be down farther on the list, but because of the other capital program going on, in this case, the water and the stormwater, that's included in next year's. Along with some of the other things we looked at as well were complaints, and we actually have gone out and driven the road since the ARA and discovered that some of the roads are deteriorating worse than what was called out on the report. So we try to keep that report up to date, but it's in-house more so. We basically use that ARA report, though, and go down the line. Some of the areas that are listed in the report may not be as high of a priority. They have still a good base in that. It'll be minimal on the impact, and we can push it off a year, and others may have to be moved up. Some of the small items like the Trafalgar Court, Elizabeth Court, Plascota, those roads right now are starting to crumble, but they were down low on the ARA report.
And also, if I recall from this year, what you try to do with a few is that we had I think in one case, we had 2 subdivisions being done, and then right in between, there was a third one that made sense since they were there to do all 3. It was not one of the top 10, but it was down like 30 or something like that, so did them all at once because of staging. So, but I think by and large, you just go down the list for the most part, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
I have no issue trusting staff is going to try and do the list. I've never been quite convinced of ARA's methodology, but it's a methodology, so we'll take it as a starting point. Appreciate the fact that you are balancing this with day-in-the-life concerns like what you just articulated, but I just want to make sure that, you know, as we go down this pathway, this is not a one-off thing. If I've heard staff correctly over time, this is multiple years at roughly $7 million a year that we're recommending. So, right, this is the start of essentially $35 million, $40 million worth of road improvements, correct, over the next 5, 6, 7 years?
Correct, and that will improve our PCI for the pavement, at which we will get to a better point and not have major impacts down the road.
Right, so, you know,
We'll be able to cut down on the,
sorry, Bill.
on the actual funding for it.
So if I understand, it's going to catch us up to a point where we can then get on a more normal 15 to 20-year cycle.
Correct.
As opposed
Right, and, you know, Mayor Pico, so extending my comments, just think it makes sense. I just want to make sure that, you know, as we go through this budget process, it's not just me saying yes to the $7 million now. I'm agreeing to these ideas in a broad consensus, if that's the right word. We're going to keep spending $7 million. And Anne Marie, you correct my financial history of Orland Park. Previously, when we've taken on big projects like this, we sort of put it into the budget, locked and loaded and pre-committed to the money, correct? Yep. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, if you want to flip to the next page. So this just continues some of the road improvement programs that we have going on. Some of it, we have STP funding for some infrastructure improvements, or I'm sorry, some resurfacing improvements on various roads. We don't necessarily get STP funding for the first 2 phases, the phase 1 and phase 2 engineering, but we do get it for the construction aspect of it. And Public Works can give you way more information on that. And then just some miscellaneous projects, the Harlem Avenue street lighting wire replacement, that's been on our CIP list for years, and it's kind of rolled out from year to year. So we've got it here in 2020.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Milani.
just a question on this. I see we get about $1.2 million in planned life cycle replacement items here, and then we put almost $1 million worth of new items in here. Were the new items things that we found recently, or these are just things that we would like to have? I mean, in my eyes, I would think I would want to take care of those $1.2 million before I added more new stuff.
Yeah, so all of these items that are listed here are included in the recommended amount that we proposed funding for on that first page. The list is really just, I sorted it by alpha, so that's why the new is before the plan replacement, but all of these items are included on that first page, and we would have funding for it if we do issue the additional debt like is mentioned.
Right. I understand that, but my question is, if we had new items, when we're borrowing money for a road program. We have a $1.2 million worth of items that are in need of replacement, and we're adding almost $1 million more of quote-unquote.
Maybe I can
new
help
items.
answer some of these questions. So I'll start at the top. 143rd Street, Wolf to Southwest Highway. We need to complete Phase 1 engineering. We're going to have to pay for that if we want the state to fund the $43 million for that project. 143rd Street was our number one priority as far as what we brought to the state. We're still waiting on IDOT for the, the July 5-year plan, then the August 5-year plan, then the September 5-year plan. Now it's the October 5-year plan. So whenever we see the 5-year plan, we'll know if they funded it.
Yeah, and Mayor Pico, just really quick, those two items also, the 143rd Street and the Wolf Road, they're actually hitting that 10-year mark where if we don't complete the engineering, we end up having to pay back what we already paid. So we really kind of need to get those
And
done.
then
I think
some of these others, like the road improvements on John Humphrey, obviously, we know we need to improve that road, that intersection for the access into the mall. The village-wide LED, it actually pays for itself, as we found, with the savings that we get for it. Same thing with the parking lot LEDs. And then you see the other road improvements and bike pedestrians. Those were all a part of our plans. They're not necessarily new. And again, when you talk about the borrowing, yes, we have to identify 3 or 4 items for the borrowing, but the borrowing is for all of this. So it's not just, to implement the whole program.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was just focused on the white items. I had understood the other ones.
Right, and some of the stuff,
Thank
like
you.
the Public Works facility, we got all that new land, and essentially, I think this next year, they're going to put fencing up around that new land and to get rid of the spoil. So it's something that needs to happen. Just because it says new doesn't mean it doesn't need to happen.
Okay.
So.
And then the last one is our water and sewer fund. So everything was presented last time. We've made some modifications. The majority of the borrowing, once again, we'll have to designate it eventually, would most likely go towards that $2.6 million you see there for water main replacement in conjunction with the road program. There's also some other items on there. The electrical upgrades at the MPS is completing the project, I believe, at the main pump station. The $350 for the residential meter conversion, we purchased, if you remember, the FlexNet meter reading system many years ago, and we've spent years installing all the smart points. This is sort of the second stage of that installation. So now we're going to implement and install the iPearl meters, which will allow us to read down to the gallon, and also allow us to roll the FlexNet system out to our residents so that they're able to watch their usage and get reports on their usage as well as we are, and it'll really help with billing for billing purposes. So getting that meter conversion process started is important. Some of the other ones on there are just kind of standard improvements. We've got a little bit more money in there, I shouldn't say a little, $1.3 million in there to finalize the Fernway area, as well as some other areas in the future. One of them being Sushler, which is related to the project we were talking about earlier.
Mayor Pico,
Trustee Malani,
saw the other one.
or Trustee Dodge, sorry.
The, Anne Marie, what is the balance in the water and sewer fund? Numbers and percent versus policy?
So we keep a reserve of 25% of operations and maintenance. So we take out things like the cost of the water, the cost of refuse, things like that. And then we also have triple R replacement fund that we utilize, and it's approximately somewhere between 1% and 2% of the replacement value of all of our assets. Both of those reserves are recommended by the industry, by AWWA, when you do a rate study.
And that's where we're sitting at now, so we're at the recommended balances.
Yes, we are.
So to the extent that
So-
we agree these are important, you're suggesting $3 million in debt against the water sewer revenues, correct?
So if we, and that's where we came up with the $3 million. So Michelle and I had gone through it when the water and sewer fund budget was first proposed. It was actually quite a bit higher than that, and we tailored it down. And what we found once we realized the consumption change in 2019, what we found is that if we funded all of that capital with cash, we would dip $3 million into our reserves. So in order to not do that, we've in our model, we either cash fund or we debt fund capital, so we would debt fund $3 million of that capital. That'll be factored in, obviously, going forward, and when we go out and do the rate study, that'll be factored into our future rates.
Right, so Mayor Pico, continuing. So broadly, once we, and those debts are going to go against the revenue, got it. So are they revenue bonds, or that's not necessarily a great deal for us, revenue bonds
So
per
we
se,
don't-
correct?
Yeah, the last time we issued bonds related to water was when we expanded the reservoir, and we went out and we issued general obligation bonds.
Because it's better than a revenue bond per
the-
se.
It's the rate is a lot lower than a revenue bond, and we had the full faith and credit availability. We've got a great bond rating, so we did it
The
that
whole
way.
shot, right.
And
So
then we
that-
abate the property taxes and use the
How long do you
revenues.
think we would issue that debt for? And then when can we get rid of it is essentially what I'm asking. Because if we're going to raise rates theoretically after the study to account for it, this feels like a cash flow management timing problem.
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend actually going out to the bond market. I would utilize our line of credit process like we do now, draw on a line of credit until the project's complete, roll it off into a term loan. Our existing lines of credit, term loan conversions have a rate of 1.9% right now, so that's pretty low. And then I would do a pretty short term, maybe 5 to 8 years, and pay it off as opposed to a regular 20-year bond where you
And
would
we're
pay
going to
so
bake
much more
that into the rate
interest.
study.
And we would build that in the rate study.
No, I mean, ultimately, this is a math problem, right? What's
Yeah,
the
it's-
cost of the money versus what you have to do, and then where do you find the payments to pay back that debt? That's
And it would all come out of water revenues.
right. No, just, you're mindful that these are the things we have to do as a board, but I'd love the people on the other side of the camera to understand what we're talking about here, which is at some point, we have to pay for getting water to your house and taking it away from your house, and here's where we are.
Well, and in total on the capital program, Anne Marie, why don't you explain, like, again, since, people can look at this, how much debt we've taken off in the last couple of years, how much we're going to take off this year and next, and then also how much we're planning on the last two. I know that Mr. Dew will be kind of explain that.
I got it here. Yeah, so Tom kind of alluded to that earlier. So currently, our GO, and I'm just talking GO outstanding debt, is $61.8 million. We're going to pay about $7 million of that off in 2019. We're going to pay another $5 million off in 2020. And then in 21, 22, we pay off all the TIF bonds, and that amounts to about $38.8 million. So after all that is said and done, if we don't issue any more GO debt, we'll only have like $11 million of general obligation debt outstanding. For a village of our size with our equalized assessed valuation, that's awesome. I mean, that's good for the bond
And what
rating.
we're doing with, and we've also taken $32 million off in the last 2 years as well?
Well, yeah, because we
Yeah.
paid down a lot of
Right,
9750
so
debt.
as by my math, that's $82 million between 2 years ago and 2022 that we've taken off, and what we're essentially doing right now, we're behind on some of our capital projects, for various reasons, including the fact that so much growth happened in such a short period of time, 20-some years ago, 20 to 30 years ago, and so what we're doing is getting caught up so we can be on a more regular payment schedule, but we're, after taking $80 million off, we're putting $11 million on, and maybe we'll put, some on the next couple of years as well, but we're still, net of everything, we're still in a very good position from a debt
Yeah,
perspective.
and also, by the time the end of 2022 comes along, all of the home rule sales tax that we currently use to pay the 9750 and TIF-related debt, all of that debt will be paid off. So that will free up that additional home rule sales tax that we'll be able to utilize to fund capital. So it's just kind of a shell game, but once the debt's gone, we'll have those revenues available.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge?
I'm just thrilled that we're in a place to have this kind of financial strength, and all those plans years ago netted us exactly this situation today so we could start to put money back directly into our residents. Worked out well.
Any other questions? Okay, so there's just 2 tabs left if we just want to quickly look at them. So we've got our technology request list here. This is the same list that was presented at the last meeting. We did talk about the phone system, which we had initially not recommended or said we didn't have funding for. So we've added that in here. So these are all the projects that would be done in 2020, probably the most important one being the phone system.
As we found out today. As we found out today.
Yes, we did. And Dave is here if you guys have any detailed questions.
And the only thing we added from the last meeting was the phones, which we said to add. Everything else the same?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
And then the last page, really quick, is just our vehicle replacements for the year. We did make a few modifications from the last time we presented this. We took, I think, 3 vehicles off, as well as 1 vehicle in the water fund that was duplicated. So this would be our vehicle replacements for 2020. And Tom Morgan is also here if you guys have any questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
It's one that stuck out to me, so I'm sure everybody else caught it. The one squad sedan that's only got 19,000 miles. That one won't go to auction. That's going to go to a CSO officer. So we're replacing the squad car for an SUV, and this is going to, so we are continuing to use it, but in a different capacity.
If I'm not mistaken, the bottom 3 marked squads are all getting rolled into CSO vehicles, correct?
CSO or another application here in the village.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
So that kind of wraps up the presentation part of it. I don't know if there's any additional questions. What we would do going forward is if the board blesses this program, it's draft until it's approved by the board in December, so it's subject to change. But we would move forward with this in our capital budget. Obviously, we're not going to do anything with the debt. That wouldn't be till sometime next year when we actually started the projects that are budgeted. But we would assume that this is what would be factored into our overall 2020 budget for capital, technology, and vehicles.
Are there any questions or comments?
Just,
So I guess what we're looking for from each of you is just a consensus if we're going to move forward with this, not actually a formal vote.
Yeah, it's just kind of
So you want to,
Mayor
recommend
Pico?
staff to move forward.
Trustee Dodge?
I have no problem supporting this as a very well-done simulation.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calendro?
I just have a quick question, Anne Marie. First of all, support everything that we're doing and the additional debt we're going to be taking out for this. It just seems like, and I haven't been here as long as some other of my colleagues, are we funding debt a little bit different this cycle than we ever had before?
So historically, we had only issued debt for kind of large projects. Like we issued debt to expand the reservoir. We issued debt to build the police facility, to build the library. We didn't issue it for kind of the annual maintenance or construction type things that we do. Back a couple years ago, we did for the first time, we issued those lines of credit. One of them was for some additional road reconstruction work, and the other line of credit was established to continue with water main and flood study projects. So we did open that window, I think in 2015 was the first time that we did that, and we've done it a few times since then. We funded the Nature Center improvements with a line of credit draw, and now we're going to be issuing something, I think, in 2020 to do the same thing. So it is kind of a policy philosophy change, but we have a lot of projects that people, all the department heads say we need to get done, and we also really do have the financial capability of issuing pretty cheap debt.
And other than those projects that we just talked about, the specific projects, it just seems like and I haven't really thought if I support this or not, we're spending money, tomorrow's money.
So
Because it used to be we had, say, $2, and we spent $2 each year on capital. Now we're spending $6.50 of next year, and 50 cents, that's a bit, I'm just trying to make it very simple. It seems like
Yeah.
we're spending tomorrow's money today.
Yep, so you get the project done in year one, but you do pay for it over the next 5 years or 8 years or however we end up amortizing the loans. So what you are doing is, although the projects are getting done in year one, we are obligating the village to set aside home rule sales tax for the next 5 to 8 years to make those debt service payments. Because you got to pay it back with something.
And with my analogy, so we're assuming that we're going to make 50 cents in home rule sales tax for the next, say, 5 years. So I hope that day never comes where we don't make that money, but we are putting ourselves out there a tad. And I know there's planning that this thing's rolling off that's going to help us, but we're all spending tomorrow's 50 cents.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to being comfortable with doing it, is we have so much debt that is rolling off that is funded by home rule sales tax, that sales tax is becoming available to pay for this new debt. So it's not like we're taking more home rule sales tax away. Some of it's going to be rolling off and become available.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of talk that through because it's a different process that we're doing.
Yep.
Thank
It
you.
is.
And Anne Marie, it's, as you said, when we turn these into term loans, it's a 1.9% rate. So money today is as cheap as you're ever going to get it. And typically, our construction projects, say, for example, roads, those prices go up more than 2% per year, correct? So we're actually getting ahead of the game by getting, and the other problem we have, particularly with roads, is that if they deteriorate to such a point, the cost to fix them becomes much higher than the overlays that we're doing. So it's catching us up on things that we're behind when we're in a good position from a debt capacity perspective to do it, so that 5 years from now, we're on a regular trajectory, a regular path where there's, every year, these things are getting taken care of and caught up, so we're not behind anymore.
Yeah, just really quick, one of the things we look at, and bond rating agencies look at also, is your debt to EAV. So at the end of 2018, when I said our GO debt was the $61.8 million, that was about 2.6% of our EAV. The board's policy that was adopted by the board many, many, many years ago was to follow the non-home rule limit of 8.625. So we are way under that limit. Knock on wood, we are never even close to it, but we really are way under that limit, so we're well within that policy.
So, if I get the clerk to just call the roll and see if everyone's on board with this capital plan?
For consensus?
Yeah, just for consensus.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Caldarella?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
And Mayor Pico,
Trustee Dodge?
so we're clear, that was just a general consensus on the numbers as presented tonight.
Yep, it will not be formally approved until December.
Thank you.
Just to give them something to work with going forward.
Yep.
I'll take a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Chairman?
Do we have anyone for public comment? Any board comments over and above what we've already talked about? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Caldarella.
I just want to thank staff for coming out. I know I haven't dealt with all the staff and most of the staff about how hard they're working with this budget process. I also, since it seemed like I was a little active with the parks discussion, I wanted to tell the park departments that they do a great job. As my analogy is, you guys fix up a great 20-year-old Cadillac, and people love the parks, but it's a 20-year-old Cadillac, so sometimes we need some help. So, but you guys do a great job keeping our facilities together and safe. I'm just saying, you're working with old parts. Thank you.
Mayor Pico,
Trustee Katsinas.
I just wanted to also say thank you as a new trustee, how you explained everything, Anne Marie. Excellent job. And thank you very much, all the department heads. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
Move to go into executive session for A, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific village employees.
Second.
Call the roll.
Aye. Sorry.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Caldarella?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge? Aye. Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.